All right, my name's Gordan Clark. I'm 91 and will be 92 in April.
How many years have you lived in Deering?
In Deering,
Yeah.
I was born in that bedroom back there, so that was 91 and a half years ago. But of course, I was in the service, gone for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years.
So you grew up in this house that looks like it was a real working farm? Or was it a homestead that had?
No, it had been kind of. There was no cattle here to speak of. There was another barn. They tore that down, the big one. And the folks, they had about 4 head of cattle and a couple of pigs and heifers and stuff like that when they took it over. And,
Did your parents live here?
Well, at first, when they come down from Vermont, yeah, they moved into here. And the fact is, I guess Howard and Margaret lived out in my garage out there, which was a room. I turned it into a garage, and there was an upstairs to it. And then it went from there. Dad built some camps down here, like to stay in, until they bought this railroad station over across in the V on the other side of the road. When that came up for sale, they bought that and put it over here on rollers, and hooked it onto them other camps. And then they all moved down there. My folks did. And Howard and Margaret, I think they went up here somewhere on the. Who lived up there?
The Robin Hill Farm. That's
Robin
where,
Hill Farm up in there,
where they
that
lived.
big white house. They moved into that one, I guess.
We've heard references to the Robin Hill Farm, a lot of references.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been named the Robin Hill Farm a long time.
Mm-hmm. What was it before that, Gordon? Do you remember the name?
Jesus, I don't know who owned it before that. We used to go up there for Thanksgiving dinners, I know, at their place. But I can't think of who they bought it from, or if they rented it. I think they bought it, because I think they moved from there up to the East Deering by the cemetery.
And when you were a child living here, can you describe this house? Was it any different in terms of, say, plumbing?
This house?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus, we tore this place apart from one end to the other. It needs it again now, but I mean, we're talking 40 years ago now or more, 50.
When you were little, Gordon, when Grammy lived here.
When you were
Oh.
just a child living here,
Yeah.
indoor plumbing?
Oh, it had plumbing, yeah. They had plumbing in here. Just cold water coming down from the mountain. Our spring is 900 feet up on the mountain
Where was the outhouse?
in the barn.
How many holes?
How many what?
How many holers?
2. Yeah,
The
well,
shell actually asked.
when Dad took the place over, they did put another bathroom in too. So then they had actually 2. They had a 2-holer and a 1-holer over on the other side, which is still there, but I don't use it.
Did your family, when you were young living here, did they have any animals? Just
Yeah, Dad always had a couple of cows, and Grandpa, of course, his wife had to milk them. My grandfather, had no arms. He only had a hook here, and this arm here had infantile paralysis, and one leg dead. So he only had one. This one here he sawed off in a shingle mill. So he had a strap there, and he could put his fork into it and stuff to eat. He could write and all that stuff. Once Grammy got him hooked up, get this harness on him, which Carol Green made up for him, his stepson. He usually made all that stuff up. You couldn't buy it, but he had the hook hooked to him, and he was the boss up there at the community center when we worked up there. Grandpa was always he was pretty smart, and but he would work right along with you. He could run a shovel or swing an axe, or he worked right along with you. But this arm here was helpless. He had a strap went down with a hook in it, and this one here he had a hook he had on this one sometimes. And the fact is, when he ate his dinner, he had a strap there, and he could put his fork right up in the strap, and he could eat his dinner and everything, or write a letter, put a pencil in there, he could write.
I've seen photos of him.
There's a
Probably in the
photo
town
right-
history.
Photo right behind you on that. You can see him right there in the middle of that book cover.
Oh yeah.
Everett Avenue.
That sorry he's got there in his hand is right by the chimney. I save all that stuff. I like to have it around and remembering him. Because I used to work with the guy all the time.
What was it like to pull the other end of that saw?
He could do that. He couldn't run a chainsaw, but he could run a handsaw. He had a thing built around the saw. He could stick his arm in it. Same way with a car. He had a ring on the wheel, and he could drive a car. And he could shift and hold the steering wheel with his leg. Of course, had to shift him, throw the clutch, you know.
So what other kinds of animals did your family have when you
Well,
were...
they had a couple of pigs underneath the barn all the time, and they had chickens, and we still got chickens out there that belong to my son.
Living next to the mountain that you do, is that how you would describe it? Or would you describe living at the bottom of the mountain or side by side? Or
We're at the bottom of the mountain. That's Big Hedgehog is over here, and this is Little Hedgehog up here. Our water comes from it's 900 feet up to our spring. It's all gravity fed.
how does the water taste?
Good. I rebuilt the spring 30 years ago when I retired from the state. I dug it by hand. It had lead pipe in there before, and I wanted to do away with the lead pipe. So I dug all the way from here, and I got Bob McAllister to help me. Paid him, you know, and he helped me dig it all the way to the spring. And then I had Kurt Rowe come in, and he dug me a new spring. And went from there. I built the cement blocks in it and all that stuff. And
How big is your spring?
it's about 10 feet inside of it, and it's got a house built over it. And it's closed in.
Kurt Rowe, he was a dowser, wasn't he?
Oh, Jesus. You can't imagine where he went in that mountain up there. And I did work for Sid Livingston myself some, and when I went to bury a lot of it, he'd let me use his little tractor to get what I could get with that, and some of it I had to do by hand, but
If you say you dug that by hand, you had to go down below frost?
well, I followed the old lead pipe when I was digging up through there, and which it wasn't. Once you get away from the yard here and up into the woods, frost don't go down very far, if at all. You know, that's why the squirrels and the stuff live just below that snow line, because it's warm there. They build a nest, and it's pretty close to the top of the soil. The snow goes over it, and they say it's about an inch down, and it's all good going. So I was down probably 2 feet, probably 6 feet going through this yard, or 5 feet maybe, because of course we keep it plowed.
What kind of jobs did you have to do as a child here on the farm? Chores?
Sure. Well, I helped hay. We did a lot of haying when it come that time, and I did help with the plowing. We had an old doodlebug tractor, and Dad would run the plow behind it, and I'd tow it with a doodlebug. And Mother used to do it. She got sick of it, and she got off the tractor and told Dad, "You got a son there that's about 13 years old, and he can run that tractor." And you had to crank it. I stalled it about 6 times trying to take off pulling that plow, and he very patiently went around and cranked it. An old 26 Dodge, yeah.
When you did hay, did you use horses for that? When you hayed?
No, we had them doodlebugs.
The doodlebug.
But we did have a horse here for a while. It was a riding horse.
Can you describe for me haying?
We have the mower still underneath the barn. All the equipment's still around here, and we just hooked it into the tractor and pulled it along behind that doodlebug. And of course, somebody had to ride the mower to pick the bar up and down. But this barn's all equipped with a hay fork and everything in it. You know, you drive in there with a full load of hay and it scrapes right on the roof going into the barn. And if it was good, solid hay, you know, clover and stuff like that, about 4 forkfuls of that big fork, and it'd take it up into the top of the barn, and you could trip it up there and dump that whole. It only took about half an hour to unload that whole load of hay with it.
Describe the fork that you used to lift the hay.
Why, it's got these big things that stuck out, because you can't see it here on this camera, but stuck out like that, and you just push them down into the hay, And then this center thing locks it. You push this spear right down into it, and that locks. And this cable rope goes into that, and it goes up to the track. And of course, there's a trip up there. If you're pulling this side of the bind, you hook onto this side with a rope. You got to pull it up with a horse or a car or something. We always use the doodlebug. But and if you wanted to go on the other side of the bind, you got this side full, you just turn the rope and send it out the other way through the blocks up in the bind, and the long, heavy rope, it's still up in the bind, hooked onto it. Fork's still up there.
Did you ever bale hay, or was it always loose hay?
Always loose hay we had. And I've seen that bind chuck a block full. Because Arthur Whitney used to own this place, and he had all these fields he hayed, and then he, after he sold it to the folks, the farm, well, then he rented some of the bind to put his hay in. I've seen that bind chuck a block full.
So did people sell hay, or is the hay always for personal consumption?
Well, I guess Arthur Whitney must have he had a farm and cattle on it, I guess. He just stored the hay here because it was handy to the field.
So, when you sell it by the bale, that's easy to...
I don't think they had bales at first.
Right.
They were just coming into it, I guess. They had them after a while, but at that point, it was all loose hay. That's what the bind was set up for.
What time of year, what month do you remember haying, getting ready to hay?
Probably around July or something like that.
Did you do 2 crops usually?
No, usually just one crop, but we did a lot of them. We didn't do this big field. The field did go with the farm, but when they bought it, the field was gone. We own it now. We bought it back again. Barbara and I did. But we used to work for Harry French. I don't know if you remember him or not, but he had several big fields over here where Carroll is. He owned all that field, and he had another one over by the river, 10 acres over there. And we even went clean up on the Cork Hill to the Tacey farm, which burned after a while. I'm the first one to see it burn. We just hayed that. We'd hayed it, and then Dad and another guy, our helper, was walking up the road, and I was just a kid. But I was walking way ahead of them, and Jesus, that whole barn was on fire. After we get done haying, the whole building burnt flat.
I want to ask you about fire, and that was a memorable fire. Were there any other fires that you remember that was created loss for people?
God, I can't think of any.
How about fire in general? How important was that, and how much of that was on your mind, the potential for catastrophic loss from fire?
You mean for me? I mean,
for everybody.
I was just a kid. It's the first fire I ever saw, but I know I ran back up the road and told Dad and the fellow that was with him, I said, that house is on fire. Well, I guess it got set. I guess somebody set it. But, of course, it burnt flat. They didn't have the fire departments they've got now. And it didn't take it long to go.
For a long time, fire must have been a fear of everybody.
It's still a fear of me. I'm pretty careful around this place. I try to be, these big buildings and stuff. And I'm pretty careful with fires. Field up the Tacey farm, I remember Dad leaving it. Once he went off and left me, I guess he didn't need me. So I was only a kid, probably 6, 7 years old. So I run like a son of a gun to catch up with it. And of course, he had the doodlebug, and he was towing a hay rack and a mowing machine and a horse rake behind that. And we'd spend the whole day up there. We'd mow it, and when we come back home, we had a load of hay. It dried and everything, and we brought the whole thing back. But I didn't want him to go off and leave me. I wanted to be there. Because he had other men helping him.
Did you have any other siblings living here?
Our kids we brought up in this house.
No, you as a child, did you have any brothers or sisters?
Well, yeah, I had twin sisters down to the other house. They were also born in this bedroom. And then my brother, Russell, but he was born down in the depot part. And Laura Whitney, I don't know if you know her or not, but she was born down there too. But that's...
Did you get over to the other side of Deering much when you were younger?
Oh, yeah.
How would you get there, first of all? What route would you take?
Well, Jesus, probably 149. I drove
You
up.
didn't go right over the mountain here?
I have been. The road used to be better. Because back then, well, Carol Green was a road agent. And they get gas tax money if they just keep it up and make it passable. And he'd run that grader through there once a year so the town could have that money coming in. And it was pretty passable. But right now, it's passable, but you got to have a pretty good rig to get up through there, a high, because it's pretty rough. But they do it. Them Jeeps coming through there.
How about town meeting? Did you attend town meetings much?
Well, yes, but I don't do much talking up there. I do a lot of listening. But I just observe. I don't get up and say anything because I don't figure I'm as smart as some of them people. I just let them go at it and listen. And then I put my 2 cents in with a vote if they need one, you know. But
Where did you go to elementary school?
right over here to this little schoolhouse by the airport. I went by it up to just past Kiblin's. In fact, his brother used to be the custodian up there. He used to go in and build the fires and all that stuff in the morning, get the school ready. And I don't believe there's more than a dozen, 15 people up there. And I can't even think of their names now, hardly. It was me and my sisters, and of course the McAllisters and the Kiblins. But Wayne, I think he went probably to Eastern. I don't know. That's where they came from. So.
Well, and then you went to Hillsborough at a certain point.
Yeah, around the 6th grade it was. That's after this school had burnt, and they'd moved this one down, of course, from this up by Fletcher's house there across the street up on the knoll. That's where this school originated from. The town pulled it down with their tractor and sat it there. And we went to school there for several years before they shut the thing down. We all went to Hillsborough then.
How was the road plowed?
Well, back then we got some snow.
Yeah.
I mean, it snowed. We used to go over there by the schoolhouse. I was telling Barbara, there'd be 5 or 6 of us shoveling in front of Alvy Fisher that was running the town crawler tractor with a V plow and wings on it. It looked like a setting in coming down the road. But he'd go in there to that drift, and it was so rugged that he would get to spinning, and they'd get stuck, and then we had to go out in the woods and find some trees that we could handle, cut some pieces out so we could throw them underneath his crawler so we could back up out of there again to get another run on it, because that was drifts, and they were probably 6 feet tall. You know, we used to get some snow around this place.
Was it colder?
Oh, it was cold too, yeah. We've got pictures right out in our dooryard. They hand shoveled it. The neighbors would all get together, and we got pictures of probably 8 or 10 people shoveling this yard out. And then, as I remember, we went from there. I was only about 15, I think, then, or maybe younger. But we'd go over by Wayne Wilson's house, and that road there, across his place, goes up on that hill to a house. We shoveled that whole thing out up through there because they couldn't get up in there with a. I don't know if they didn't have the tractor going. It took all day with the tractor in it. If he went around the town, he couldn't go very fast. And finally, they come in. They bought this was back in '39, I think it was. They bought I think it was a Mack truck, about 1.5 tons, I guess it was. I know because I learned how to drive on that truck years ago. Howard was road agent, and he couldn't get anybody to help him. Of course, they only put out a load or 2 of sand a year because there was no traffic. But they're getting a spot up on the Gibson Mountain Road there. Gould Hill it is, I guess, up that road. And we put 2 truckloads up there. But after we hand loaded that truck, Howard says, "When you drive it," and I says, "I never drove a truck in my life. I was just a kid." He says, "I'm ruggeder than you are." He says, "I'll do the shoveling, you drive the truck." And that's when I went grinding teeth. But he stayed with me. He didn't fall out. So,
That's hard work, hand tossing.
oh yeah, but see, there was no traffic to speak of, so you didn't have to put it out like they do now. You know, it's It's a different situation now.
Do you remember the railroad?
Sure do, yeah. I remember them old steam engines coming down through there, and the engineer was in good with me, I guess, because I'd sit out on my lawn out there in a chair. When I heard him coming, he was tooting his horn way up past the Worth house, I think it was up there. That burnt. I don't know, it was that big farm, but way up in there, it was coming down to the airport, tooting the horn, and I could hear him coming. I'd pull up my chair out there on the lawn, and I'd wait for him, and he'd throw the newspaper out to me every night, every day. He'd go by. He'd bring that paper out. I'd bring it in for the folks. God, I thought I'd done something big. I probably weren't more than 6, 7 years old at that time, so.
How many cars were on the train?
Well, at that time, probably 2 or 3, because a lot of this was after the 38 hurricane. Of course, I took the track out then from Henniker on. The trains used to go right through, to Concord. You had passenger trains, you had work trains, there was all steamers, but there might be 3 or 4 a day. And you had a flag station down there. They flagged the track, and a man stayed in it all the time. That's up back, too. We bought the whole thing when they bought the railroad out there. When they sold it, they bought the house and the long building out past Chris's house. That's where the farmers all stored the milk, waiting for the milk train to come through. Of course, these trains went through from Nashville, come right through here in Henniker and right on to Concord. Then the 38 hurricane come along, and it washed that whole track out. You probably know that down past Hillsborough there, the track all went out. And so they not so many trains come through then. There was only one. I guess that's when they moved the flag station and all that stuff.
Why did the track go out? Was it too close to the river or something? The river?
It just washed out. Gone. Took it right out.
Speaking of the Hurricane of 38.
But the old road still goes down through there now. And because we take it, you can get through with a pickup, or if you're careful with a car. But we go through with the little 4-wheelers and side.
How about all the blowdown after the hurricane? What did that look like?
It was a mess. I was down in that depot house there. I was just a kid. Remember sleeping in a bed in the part of that house, and a big oak tree come down and hit the house and went right through the window. And my older sister was standing there, and she screamed and ran and jumped right into bed with me, knocked me out. Because I was just a kid. I didn't know what was going on. But I remember that part of it. And then it took me quite a few days to clean the whole. The water was right in the road out here when that sort of rain came through. This road out here was actually covered too. That's how high up it come.
You didn't get a lot of warning, did you?
No, they didn't know too much about that back in the olden days. I was just a kid. I didn't know. Even during the storm, it didn't bother me any. I didn't know what was going on. I had my head underneath a pillow laying on the bed.
And the morning after, what was that
Well,
like?
we got pictures of them down there with hand saws and no chainsaws. And they was all working, sawing them oak trees up. I mean, the trees, some of them were monsters. Because the one that came down went through the house. Just one limb hit it. But it was a mess.
When you went to Hillsborough to school, what was that like going from the schoolhouse here to Hillsborough School?
It was better off then because we had a bus come around here and picked us up. This other school, we had to walk 2 miles for this little school, but then the bus come right down and turned right here at the mailboxes, you might say. So.
Did you graduate from Hillsborough,
Yeah.
Hillsborough High School?
Yeah. Yeah, and I worked there some for, they called him Uncle Bob Matthews. He was the custodian. I used to go in early in the morning and help him work in around his furnaces and stuff, sweep the floor. That's back when I was in high school. I'd earn my dinners that way. I didn't have to pay for my dinner if I worked with Bob. So I got in good with him. And luckily his son-in-law worked for the state, Dude Kemp and all them people, so I was in good with them too. So eventually I got on with the state. I worked for pretty 40 years with them.
What did you do for the state?
When I first got there, I got all the dirty work there was going for the first 2 or 3 years. I thought they were going to drive me out of there, but I stuck it out. But dude Kemp, he was the nicest boss I ever had in my life. But boy, he'd like to get you a goat and then laugh like hell at you. But he'd do anything for me. My God, I was going to work with an open air Jeep down near the state barn, climb right into the snowdrift, all open, no top, no nothing. Did that for a couple of years, I guess. And finally, one day, dude drove in there. He just bought his wife a new Chevrolet car, and she had a beautiful '39 Oldsmobile. Drove that in there, and of course, I kept eyeballing it and looking at it. And she was saying what a nice car that was. And he says, "If you think that car's so wonderful," he says, "why in hell don't you just take it home?" So, sure, we did. We had that car for quite a few years. It was a nice old car.
Did you have a bicycle when you were younger?
Yeah, Monarch Silver King. My oldest sister bought it for me. And shortly after I got it, I rode it clear to Franklin, 42 miles up to Webster Lake. We had a camp up there on Webster Lake, the folks did, and I rode it all the way to that camp. It was about my first ride. I was probably up, 13, 14 years old then. But I don't know where that is. That's not around the barn. Usually everything stays here. Everything. Gets in that barn for it and don't leave.
Have you burned wood your whole life?
Yeah.
Cut your own wood?
Yeah, we still do. Yeah.
What do you chop it with? What do you cut it with?
My son, if it wasn't for him, I couldn't do it. But my son looks after me. He's 60 years old, I guess. He was born in 63?
Before your son started doing it, while you were still doing it.
Oh, I could do it, yeah.
What were you using?
I used to get it up. I had a chainsaw. I'd get it up for my father. Because he was up my age. He got to 96. But he always wanted to be there when I was cutting it. I remember once I felt sorry for him and I didn't take him down. And I went down through with the tractor and the trailer and was starting to saw my wood down there. And pretty quick, here comes my father walking down. And that's when the tracks were still there. They hadn't tore them up. He tripped and fell and struck his head and blood coming all over him. And I felt bad because I'd gone off and left him, but I didn't want to work him, But he wanted to be there whether he worked or not. He'd lay down and go to sleep under a tree while I was working. I pulled the same thing on my son here a while back, and he went off and left me. So I got down there and I told my son, I know just how my father felt now. I said, I can't do much, but I want to be there in case something happens to you, If you get stuck or get hurt. He said, next time, Dad, I'll tell you.
You still do a lot.
Funny, what goes around comes around.
Yeah. What's your favorite kind of wood to work with? Splitting. For
It
firewood.
doesn't matter much now. We got a splitter that'll do anything, but oak is awful good wood. You got to let it dry for a couple, 2 or 3 years. That's some of what I'm burning now. It's been cut for 3 years, I guess. But
If you had to work wood by hand with a chainsaw, but split it by hand.
split it. Well, oak splits pretty good by hand. Yeah.
What's the worst splitting wood by hand?
The worst? Probably elm or something like that.
I never met a beech tree I liked either.
No, beech is bad. I used to be at community center, and we'd be up back there cutting for Mr. Wright and stuff. They burnt wood around there. And Carol Green was there, and my Grandpa Rabbit, and my father was working there too, I guess, at that point. But Carol was awful good with dynamite and powder and stuff. We was cutting beeches up in there, and we'd blow them up. Jeez. We had kindling wood. They always called him Dynamite Green.
I've heard stories. Yeah. How would you refer to or explain the presence of Hedgehog Mountain and what it does to the different parts of Deering? How it impedes, for example, how it makes traveling back and forth between the two difficult.
Well, you have to go a long ways to get around it, that's all. Down the Long Woods Road. course, probably you live around here, you know that too. So I think they should tar it, and they should have years ago when Howard was road agent. They voted the money up for that road, have it tarred. I don't know where the money went, but the road never got tarred, and they says it's not worth tarring because there's no underpinning under it, and they says it'll all sag. Well, you shim that up. I worked for the state for years, and we used to shim roads all the time. They get a sag in it, we bring in hot top before we put the Dixie field over it. You do the same thing with that road. They got so damn much gravel now there, they don't know what they're doing with it. And they say you got to truck more in. Well, back years ago, the road wasn't only just about get two cars by each other. Now it's stretched way out into the woods. Of course, the snowplows hit it and stuff, and I'll admit there's nothing out there to hold it up. But anyways, we're never going to get the tar road in my lifetime, and Howard thought it was going to be in his lifetime. But he got a surprise. It was 50 years has gone by, and it ain't done yet. So.
Did you attend any of the dances they had in Deering Town Hall?
I ain't much of a dancer.
Okay.
No.
When you want to do social events, we probably went to Hillsborough to the
We had
movies.
to walk all the way up the backwoods road. Of course, I was a kid then when the theater was there. It only cost 25 cents to go to it or something like that. It wasn't much to get in. But as I come through the covered bridge, that's burnt down. Some lunkhead had to burn that down. It's too bad. It should have been there forever.
Old home days in Deering. Did you attend those?
Yeah, we go to one, yeah.
The earliest home day in Deering that you remember attending?
Oh, gosh.
Don't know.
Quite a while back.
What would they be like? What would happen there?
Well, I guess it's just a good time. I don't know. Yeah.
The greased pig and how they dressed up. Uncle Howard and Aunt Margaret, they dressed up in the old-fashioned clothes, and they had the big barbecue and games for kids. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's why it's good to have her
Don't be
around.
sorry.
She can remember more than I am because she's a kid. She's 6 years younger than I am. I'm lucky. I got it made. I come in here at night and I sit down, pull up my chair, my table, and in comes my supper. I married her at 16, and everybody said it wouldn't work. And that was, what, 68 years ago or something?
Yeah, a long time ago.
And I never regretted a day of it.
What kind of event in West Deering caused excitement?
Well, when they had the old truck meets over here, that's kind of exciting to see them come in. They used to have them at the McAllister farm, and now they have them at the airport. But that's something to see.
Have they been doing that for a long time?
Well, 5 or 6 years, I guess. Before that, they had old engines. They brought them in. These old one-linear motors had them going. I got one of them little steam engines up in the barn. It's a little tiny guy. It's supposed to run off steam. I can run it off air. I got an air compressor out there. I hook that onto it, and it'll run it. And then Uncle Bob, I used to work for, you might say, is a custodian in Hillsborough High School, is the one that had it, and he gave it to me. So,
What was Bob's last name?
Matthews. Bob Matthews.
Court Plain Militia, dear.
Huh?
Court Plain Militia, too.
Oh, yeah, our snowmobile club down here. Wayne Wilson, I think, put it together. That was the Court Plains Militia. We joined that club, and we had a pretty good time back in them olden days.
How many members do you think?
God, you had to ask Wayne that one. Did he say anything about it?
He did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think he mentioned how many members.
No.
I'll bet there was 30 members or more, probably. Then.
Last weekend was the vintage.
They went by here. It was all good going. Boy, about 200 of them went by.
Over.
Yeah.
Finally got some snow.
Yeah, and then about 2 days later, now it's dirt down through there.
Yep.
And sap's
Yes.
running like crazy.
More snow coming Tuesday or Wednesday, I guess. So,
Christmas. Any things that you did as a family that was kind of unique?
well, I can't think of anything offhand. Unique when they come around Halloween there. Bobby Green used to come around, a whole trailer load of people, kids. Of course, he passed away, but they still pulled it off this year. They had 2 tractors and trailers. A lot of kids came around still. That was an attraction for me.
How about people who were mentors to you? People who may have pulled you aside. You talked about Mr. Matthews and Kemp.
You mean that helped me out?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you, when I got done for the state, when I retired, the doctor told me I needed a lot of exercise, and I'm half a diabetic. He said, the more walking you get in, he says, the better. And I told Barbara, I says, I'm going up and find out where the cemetery crew is. I'll get in with them, and I'll mow lawns, mow cemeteries. So I found out Tom Kapatis was at the head of it, so I went up and saw Tom and asked him, I says, you got an opening for anybody for cemeteries? And he said, why, you want a job? And I said, well, that's what I'm looking for. And yeah, he says, I'm the one to see. He says, I'll hire you on. You start tomorrow. And I said, well, where do they all meet, Well, that's up to you, because you're it. I said, what? 6 cemeteries and I'm it? But I come back up, and I mowed for several years for them. They'd only had a couple of $1,000s to work for, but I told Barbara, I need the exercise, I'll just keep going anyways. But I know they wanted to go off on bids, so it did, and that was the end of my job. Well, it made it good for me because I had insurance through the cemetery. I guess the town was covering me with insurance. But in the wintertime, I'd go onto the snowball trucks, and run wing. I was with Polbath Kiblin and some of them guys, that worked for Peter Beard. Peter hired me on. If had a bad storm or something, I'd ride shotgun, and help them put out the sand, level it off in the bodies and everything, But it made a good job. But then I guess it petered out.
The guy who was driving the truck, when I got in there my first day, I asked him what happens if I hit a mailbox with the wing.
Oh boy, here we
He
go.
said, they go down.
Yeah.
That's what he said. They go. Actually, he said,
I
they
can
go
tell you-
down.
I can tell you one better than that. These mailboxes. I set mine up down here once 3 times in 1 year. Within 3 months, I guess it was. I no more get it fixed up and somebody back into it. And finally, the town hit it, I guess, a 3rd time, and it flattened it. But by God, I'll give them credit. Of course, they knew I was getting old, I guess. I don't know, but they put me up a new mailbox. It was better than it was before.
Yeah.
And that one is still there. I moved it a little bit too. I got it out of the way, but
I think they only do that for certain people.
I know
'Cause
because I worked for the state too, and I've had a few mailboxes myself. I mean, I was driving some big rigs. There were Wallace Snow Fighters, and I hit my uncle's mailbox up in the upper village. It was a hell of a crust, and Christ, the snow was flopping up and down. And last I see of that mailbox, it was on a hunk of crust, and it was going right on around back of his barn. It was about a quarter of a mile. I never heard nothing from it. But then this other woman, hers got broke, and I didn't do it. I don't know who did it, but I didn't do it. But they came down, it was at night. We was just getting out of work, and she wondered who was going to fix that mailbox. And they said, why? I was the only one left there, I guess. Everybody had left. And she said that split it. She says, I bought it as brand, the post is gone. She says, it's all split. Well, I went up and looked at it, and I fixed the damn thing for it. It took me half the night, but I was a little late getting home from work. But I fixed the mailbox just to keep her happy, but you don't have to. It's supposed to keep it back, but it happens, that's all. The same way with my mailboxes down here. It was accidents, Some guy come in with a big truck delivering stuff, I guess, and he backed around and he squashed it. And I fixed that one myself. I bought a new mailbox, set it all up, and it wasn't 3 weeks later, somebody else hit it. And finally the town hit it, and I said, is there any end to this thing, My gosh. But they
Never considered like moving the mailbox to a different location?
We did.
Oh,
We
you did?
moved it. They found it.
We did.
They always find it with me. They haven't got it yet this year.
Back in the day, how important were traveling salesmen? Vendors.
Well, I've seen them come down to my mother's place. They was down there when I was a kid. I can remember they was trying to sell pots and pans, I guess, or something. They put on a big feed right in that house, and all the neighbors come. And I was young. I didn't know what was going on, but we had some good food around there. I know that. But he was selling pots and pans, obviously.
They didn't have like a weekly person who came and sold meat or bakery or...
Oh yeah, there used to be a baker coming through here, a baker wagon, and there still is a truck through here that sells meat and stuff. I ain't seen him this year yet, I guess, but he did come through here last year. Come right through the yard and stop because Debbie bought a lot of merchandise off of him.
Speaking of merchandise, how important was the Sears and Roebuck catalog?
Well, yeah, that always come in the mail too. Yeah,
Talking back in the the 40s during the war, for example.
yeah. I remember when they came. I don't know how much we bought out of it, but I'd have fun going through it, looking at it, see what was for sale. The big thick. Well, we got some of them out in the outhouse now. The great big thick ones are laying there.
What was it like living during the war?
Well, I was pretty young. I know our teacher over there, Mrs. Davis, the war was it was over, I guess. And down if her husband didn't get killed over in Germany or somewhere there. And she about went ballistic. It was 2 or 3, 4 weeks before she ever come back to school. And back then, it's kind of funny, irate because our sub teacher, her husband would take her to work, and what do you suppose she'd come in on? If it was summertime, it'd be a buggy wagon, and in the wintertime, it'd be a sleigh. That's all they had was that horse and buggy. That was quite a few years ago. Well, it was just going out of style, I guess, when I was a kid. It was going from horses to automobiles. But,
And is that the same time tractors were replacing horses in the field? And
well, I don't know. Dad always had a doodlebug, and Archie McAllister always had a pair of horses. He'd hay one big field, we'd be on the other one doing it with doodlebugs, but they all did the same thing. They all worked. They'd got the hay down.
how did neighbors help neighbors?
Well, I used to go over and help Archie sometimes put hay in that barn. He called me up once. He was short-handed, I guess. I don't know. He wanted to know if I'd go over and help Everett get the hay out of the field that time. I was running a Jeep. I didn't know anything about horses or all that stuff. I said, yeah, if I can hook the Jeep onto them buggy, it'd be a help. And he says, whatever works. So we hooked it up with the Jeep, and I pulled the buggy around the field, and we loaded it with, it was baled hay over there that time.
Was it different back then in terms of how neighbors treated neighbors, or is it pretty much the same? Are there any differences? Are there things that don't happen?
Well, I think we kind of look after each other. We try to. Rodney Kiblin and I work quite a lot together. I check on him quite frequently, and he comes over here some. Not quite so much as I go there because he don't like to get out, but I keep an eye on him. I plan to be there every 3 weeks or so. I go in and see what he's up to. But I know the other day he said, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be burning wood. And I don't know if I can do it another year or not. He's got a little tractor there with a little body on it now, and that's what he lugs his wood in with that now. But I told him then, and he says it was bad plowing. He said, I'm afraid I'm going to bump into something, He said, I got stuck here last year, and he said I had to take a bulldozer he had up back, get that out to pull his pickup out. And I told him, Rodney, I said, I don't care what time of day it is or what time of night. If you're stuck and I can help you, you holler. So I said, you're over here all by yourself. He has got, I guess, he's got neighbors or friends or people down in Francistown, I guess, that he could get a hold of. You got a niece that looks after him quite a lot.
Oh, you're closer.
Yeah, well, that's what I told him. You know, I'm right here. I said, I'll come over, Rodney, and I'll do what I can do. He and I are about the same age. Gosh, I was 1 year ahead of him down here in this grammar school, and so he must be right around 90.
Do you remember when the airport was going strong on the Hawthorne College bought it?
Yeah. I remember no airport there. There was a farm there. And that burnt down.
And then what happened?
Well, what didn't burn, they tore it down. There was a big barn, too, with it. I guess big as this one, or close to it.
Foster's?
Huh?
Was it Foster's?
Foster, yeah, I think it was Foster. I think they figured that time it was a freezer or something. They figured started that fire somehow or other. But that was a hot one.
When it turned into an airport, did that change your life at all?
It did mine once. I was plowing the main line with that Walter snow fighter it was I had. It's a big truck. Way up, way up on the Keene Road, and they come up and got me and told me to come back and plow that airport. I said, what do you mean plow it? I can't even already get in that airport. And they said, they fixed it up, you've got to plow it. And they told me how to do it. You got to do it piece by piece. You can't do the whole thing at once because it'll build up. You can't get rid of it. So you got to start on the sides. And then it took me all day long, I guess, to plow that airport out. But that's the first time I ever heard him pulling a truck off the main line. You know, well, the airport, some of it had caved in. The snow was so deep that it caved part of it in. And they wanted to get the aircraft out of there, I guess. What was left, there was airplanes out there, and they was trying to keep the snow off them, the ones that was outside, and they wanted it plowed and so they could get out of there. So they made arrangements with the state to do it. So,
do you remember the ice storm? I think it was 96, something like that.
Something like that.
do I?
We had it. Yeah.
I've seen some bad ones up in Washington. God, I've met trees coming down the road. It fell in the road, and so icy. Here comes a tree down Cali Hill, and I'm coming up the hill. And I just stopped to see what was going to happen, and it stopped before it got to me. But we had to. I always carried a chainsaw with me, and I was on the truck, and because we have to get a road through there. There ain't no. We got to keep it open for for emergency. I had to get through, so. At that time, we got pictures of it, and it's the prettiest thing you ever saw up there. All that ice around, and we was going in around the trees. We was trying to take any path we could get to open the road up, and salt it, and get down to blacktop again. I remember being up there on Cali Hill, and we tried to get up the hill, and we couldn't make it, and we backed down, and was putting chains on, and a woman come along with a car. Of course, it was all good going where we'd salted. And she says, can I get by you? And I said, it ain't going to do any good to go by you. You can't go nowhere. What do you mean? I said, it's all ice. And she said, well, where can I turn? And I said, right here. And we grabbed the car and spun it on the ice. Well, I didn't know it was that icy, she said.
Do you remember the sounds when the tree started breaking?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, we had to go up there. We worked for quite a few days getting birches out of the way. And you wanted to be careful of them because you hit it with an axe, and it would be like a 30-30 going off, and the bottom would shoot right out from under it. Then the tree would be down, loaded with ice, and we had cut it in little pieces to get out of the way. But worked all night there one night like that.
How high have you seen the river here?
Right in this road out here, 1938. Yeah. That's as high as I've ever seen them. These roads out through West Aaron are all flooded.
You could get home now?
I was just a kid, so I don't know how they did it. Of course, they had Model 8 Fords and all that stuff, were high. That would go through the water probably. I don't know.
Did you have an ice house here?
Yeah, it's made right in the barn. There's a big pit in the barn. It was all boarded right up and insulated and stuff. And they'd take the ice out of this moat over here. They call it, I guess. They'd bring it over here and fill that ice house full. Of course, they was shipping milk out of here all the time, and the milk room is still there. And,
Can you describe that a little bit more about the milk room and how the milk got there and how it got from there to the train?
That's a good question. Well, they got to the train with these cans. You know, they'd milk the cows. Of course, a lot of them was being milked by hand, but they did have a milking machine. That's still out in the barn. It's an old-fashioned one, but it's evidence of it there. You know, it wouldn't be workable. They did have that machine, but most of it was done by hand. But they'd fill these big milk cans, and they'd bring them down. And like I say, that building is out back of my son's there now. It's a long building, and that's where they brought all the farmers around here would bring their milk to that place. They had another one, I think, up by Rodney's too. I think they had a place to get rid of milk because they had that Coben farm up there, and that was a huge barn too. Put out a lot of milk. So the milk train had to make a couple of stops there. But I don't remember that. It was ahead of me. I mean, I was born after all that stuff.
Would the train whistle a lot when it came?
Well, they whistled all the crossings. That's why I could hear them coming down through when I was out there as a kid waiting. They come up to a crossing, and of course they got signs there where they're supposed to means toot so many times. And you would hear the old freight train coming. I lived long enough. They had them long enough, so I see the diesel start coming in when they came. They only run them a few years though, and that was the end of it. Of course, they could only go into Hillsborough. They couldn't go any farther. Our salt come in from the state, come in by 100 tons to a load. And they'd bring 2 or 3 carloads with them right in July when it was hot, and you had to unload them and put it down into the salt sheds, we call them up there. Somebody burnt them down now. They're gone since I was there. But we had augers going. In the morning, we had these augers set in there, and there'd be about 6 men shoveling out each side. There was probably 25 ton in each side of that car. This auger was set right in the middle, and they'd come in and drop it down to another auger, and that one would take it up and dump it off into the shed. I know dude Kemp used to complain in the morning because everybody would be pulling juice in Hillsborough for cooking breakfast and stuff. Cut the power down enough so we couldn't use our big electric motors. They'd just get hot. They'd start slowing right out and plugging up, and we'd have to wait till everybody had their breakfast, I guess, and then we'd... And then after a while, we outlived that one and the trains, and when they did away with it, and then it started coming all by tractor trailers. And then we had it made. We had a big loader down there. I usually put it in. They'd dump out in the yard, and I'd take that big loader and shove it right into the buildings.
It sounds like, were people sad when the train stopped running, or were they glad for the conveniences that replaced them?
Well, I can't speak for everybody, but I hated to see them quit myself. You know, I like trains. I used to like them old steam engines. I don't know if you ever saw that, what they called that big boy or not. Oh, that was a big train. And during the war, they said that would carry 5 miles of cars behind it from one place to another. They had 5 of them, I think. They had one station right over here in Vermont, and I went over and saw it. It wasn't runnable. It was just sitting there. This was 30 years ago now, I guess. But since then, they've hooked onto it. Now I think it's down in Pennsylvania. It's in a museum. They call it the Big Boy. It was a monster. They said it would haul 5 miles of cars behind it on the flat going.
How important was Antrim to West Deering? Was it equally as important as Hillsborough was?
Antrim?
Yes.
That's where this stove come from. By train, and I went over with my dad with a Model A Ford, and it was all crated up. He bought it brand new. And it was down in the other house for years where Dad was. And finally, Dad got in bad shape, and Barbara and I told him, "You got to come up here and stay with us." Mm-hmm. He says, "If I come up here, that stove is coming with me." So I had to move my stove out of here, and this one went in. This was his favorite stove.
Our mail used to come from Antrim, so we were associated with Hillsborough and
I'm
Antrim.
wondering, would you remember when there were a lot more elm trees?
Well, yeah, of course they took them on account of the disease, didn't they, or something?
Did they cut them, or did they just watch them decay?
Well, they cut them.
Like,
I'll tell you a story. We had a great big maple out here on our lawn. This was only a few years ago. And it was a monster, and I always worried about it. But then we was asleep one night about 2 o'clock in the morning. I had a grandson living upstairs at that time. But boy, we heard a crash, and what the hell was that? About 2 o'clock in the morning. A big crash, and Chris come running down the stairs. I thought he'd fell down the stairs. It was making such a noise. And wanted to know what was going on. And I said, I don't know. I said, open the front door and see what you can see. Nothing but limbs pressed against that screen door. And the next morning we went out around there, and the whole half of the limb on the tree had come down, but it was made like an elbow, and it struck the ground out there, and it kind of spanked the house because it went right over the house and down into the dooryard, some of it. Never broke a shingle on the house. Never. The flag was out there, and it come just right, went right by our flag. Missed the screen house.
I wondered if we could just get a follow-up on the Daring Conference Center. You said you and Keith's dad had planted all those trees?
Yeah, because we built a dam down there too. You know, there's that brook down there. The only time I remember Donnie Johnson is when they put us on that detail planting them trees. They had a hell of a bunch of them, pine. But all we did, we stuck a shovel down in the ground and tipped it ahead, and the other one had a bunch of trees with us, and put it down in there and flop it back. And they had a line right down through, so we had them right in a straight line. I told Donnie, is there any end to this business of planting trees? Of course, we were both young then, you know. We was getting the brunt of everything. So any hard job we usually had.
what was the point of planting the trees? Was that just something that...
I don't know. I think they've cut them all down now. I'm not sure, or a good part of them. But I had to laugh because, of course, there's a bunch of camps way up in back, and Carol was the boss of that job. Grandpa was there too. We was digging by hand, and Carol said, there's got to be a better way than this. Of course, he's the one I tell you he likes to use dynamite. We use this ditching dynamite. You poke a hole about 1.5 feet, 2 feet out, down in the ground, you know, 2 feet or more, and take a stick of dynamite and chuck them right down in them holes and right up through with them. And you set the first one off, and it sets the rest of them off. Jesus, it took us a day to set all that stuff up, I guess, and then Carol lit the first one off, and geez, that looked pretty up through there. You could see it opening right up all the way up through. And then we just got in there and cleaned it out. I imagine Johnson was in on that, probably, I don't know. I know I was. I'll tell you one better than that. We was way over the other side of Deering on 149 there, and there's a house, there's a road that goes across, you know, comes down from the cemeteries up there, and it crosses the main road and it goes up that hill. It's a dead end. But there's a house right there. Uncle Howard used to live there. He finally bought that place out, and he lived there. But this was before him. There was somebody else there. But Carol and I was down there, and of course it was raining that day, cloudy and wet and damp and everything else, you know. And beavers had built a big dam down there, and it was backing the water all up on us. But Carol says, how the hell are we going to get to that dam, you know, to blow it out? We were sitting there trying to figure it out, and I said to Carol, why the hell can't we take a board and put some dynamite on it? It's got a fuse, put a long fuse on, figure out how long it's going to take it to get down there. And we'll float it right out in the current. God, he said, that's a good idea. So
Right.
blow it up with dynamite. We touched it off, and we got the heck out of the way, you know, and we see it floating down through there, and struck the dam, and it stayed there, and we decided it got wet and weren't going to work. And all of a sudden, boom! The dam was gone. It also took the windows right out of that house up there, the concussion. Nothing hit it. It was the concussion. It just snapped some of them bedroom windows right out that Carol and I had to put back in. That was the end of the water. It went down pretty fast.
didn't tell you about picking milkweed pod. They had to pick milkweeds during the war. The kids did.
Yeah, they make life jackets out of the milkweed pods.
So
That
they
was
did
back in that World
in
War
the
II
school.
there, you know,
It was
was
I
going
thought
on.
that was interesting.
And everybody was supposed to go out and get all the milkweed pods they could so they could make up these life preservers and stuff. And so Mrs. Davis lugged us in her car around to different places and dropped us off. If we saw where there was a good crop of milkweeds, you know, and go to this big brick house over here on the flat. I went up there and we was picking around there, and the old lady come out and says, you know, I've got a bunch of that I've picked. You can have it if you want it. And I said, geez, I'll take anything I can get. Somebody was there. I don't know who it was. They went off. They didn't want nothing to do with that. So, I put them with mine. And I think I'm the one that Mrs. Davis, whoever got the most milkweed pods got some kind of a little prize. It didn't amount to nothing, but I got the prize.
They went around
Probably a lollipop or something. I don't know. We was just kids.
They collected pots and pans too for the war effort around here. Gordon was.
Oh yeah, dude Kemp used to come around with his big boom on his wrecker truck, and he had a dump truck too. Of course, he was at the head one down here at the highway department, and he'd go around to everybody's house, and if they had anything they wanted to donate, if it was a heavy engine or something, he'd pick it up with his boom and put it in his truck. He was donating his time. He never got nothing out of it. We used to go around and thaw out culverts for the B&M Railroad. Of course, he liked trains too, you know. And if they were froze or something, he had a big steamer there he'd made up, and we'd make plenty of hot water, and he'd bore a hole right through it, that culvert. And I don't know if they ever paid him or not. He always paid me. Dude did, but
What was his first name?
Dude. Well, I was calling him Dude. Do you have a name other than that, woman?
I can't.
I worked for the guy for years.
Yeah, dude. Was he related
His
to
brother,
Dick?
his brother's name was Sam.
What was Dick Kemp a relation?
Oh yeah, that was a nephew.
A nephew. So now I
Dick
know how
and
old
John.
this guy. Okay, I have the age thing now.
Dick and John was both my friends too.
Yeah.
Jude come down here once with that machine,
Oh yeah.
and my water was frozen in the dooryard. We bored right down through. I knew where the pipe was because I dug the hole, and it took us 2 or 3 days, but we bored right down through there, and it thawed out. And he never charged me nothing. He wouldn't. Yeah, he said, you owe me a supper. He came in and had supper with us after he'd worked all through his weekend and all that stuff, helping me. But that's about the first time that I ever lost the water in the house. It's a funny feeling not to have any water.
What was so severe that you lost the water then?
It froze.
I know it froze, but why? Was it sustained days of cold?
Yeah, it was cold. It was buried deep too, because it was right in the corner of the dooryard. But it was where it went down into the barnyard. It got a little bit closer there, but it evidently, I had it dug up that year, and it hadn't probably got packed down good. I don't know. But of course, we kept it plowed, and people are running over it, and it dries the frost right out. Once you get away from the road and you into a snowbank somewhere in the field, frost don't go down. A mole will go down on the ground and they just skim underneath that, so they can eat the grass as they go underneath, and it's all not froze.
And no snow.
Even a
that
mole is
winter.
pretty smart.
So traffic on bare ground drives the frost down
If it's not covered.
if it's not covered.
Yeah.
If it's bare.
But you take and plow it off and then start driving traffic over it, and it'll go down deeper. It'll go down 3-4 feet of frost. Then you come up out of it to a field, and moles are chewing grass roots off right underneath it. They were smart enough to know that they can go.
Terrible.
Up in the woods there where we was digging now, that pipe I don't think is down more than a foot. I was following the old lead pipe. But I have another one, an overflow pipe that comes down. It goes to our fish tank. And that very seldom, it don't break the pipe. Sometimes it'll pull apart in the winter. That's right on top of the ground. But it isn't running, it's shut off. It's couple of places it'll unplug on me, and I just push it back together and tighten the clamps up.
Thank you very much. And
Geez, we've been hooked up through all this stuff.